In all my years as a realtor, I've learned every agent has that one house. The one that sticks with you. The one you don't joke about at open houses. The one that still haunts your dreams. This is mine. But it's more than just that house. It is the house. It wasn't even that old. A late 70s split-level ranch with 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, and a decent-sized lot backing onto a small wooded area. From the outside, it looked like any other suburban home, except for the price. It was listed at about 30% below market value. I took the listing in March 2016. The owner was a bank. It had been foreclosed and sat empty for almost a year. The bank manager seemed eager, too eager, to unload it, even at a loss. But I was just excited for the opportunity. At the time, I chalked it up to the usual. Banks don't like holding on to properties. The first weird thing happened during the initial walkthrough. I brought my assistant, Jen, to help with photos and measurements. The house was empty. Furniture gone. Auction tags still stuck to the floors and places. We split up. She went upstairs, and I went to the basement. It was partially finished, with paneling, drop ceiling, worn carpet. Nothing too unusual. But it was cold. Colder than it should have been. Sure, it was March, but the heat was on. I made a mental note to have the furnace checked. While I was measuring a room down there, I heard heavy footsteps above me. Slow, steady, like someone in work boots pacing across the living room floor. At first, I thought it was Jen. Then I realized those footsteps were way too heavy. Jen! I called up the stairs. No answer. I went upstairs and found her in the master bedroom, sitting cross-legged, flipping through paperwork. You hear that? I asked. Hear what? I thought you were walking around upstairs. I've been sitting here for 10 minutes. We both laughed it off. Old house, creaky floors, weird acoustics. There's always a rational explanation, right? But then things got worse. As we were finishing up, I stood in the kitchen jotting down some notes when I suddenly felt a pinch, sharp, like someone had twisted a piece of skin on the back of my calf. I yelped and spun around. No one was there. Just as I was rubbing my leg, trying to make sense of it, I heard it. A scream, high-pitched, female, agonized. It echoed through the house. Jen and I nearly collided running to the front door. We stood outside, pale and shaking. What the hell was that? She asked. I muttered something about a cat, but we both knew it wasn't a cat. We searched the house again, every room, closet, corner. Nothing. No open windows. Back door locked from the inside. Still, I told myself it came from the woods behind the property, or a neighbor. Anything but from inside. Then came the first open house. Disaster. Despite a ton of advertising, only 4 groups showed up. 3 left almost immediately, each with a weird, vague excuse. One said it didn't feel right. Another said the energy was off. The 4th, a young couple with a toddler, seemed genuinely interested. We were chatting in the kitchen when their son came screaming into the room. He was hysterical, could barely get the words out. The little red man, he tried to take my car. His parents looked mortified. Imagination, they said. He watches too many cartoons. But the boy wouldn't stop crying. They left in a rush. They never called back. Over the next few weeks, I showed the house to maybe a dozen more people. 3 of them, who never spoke to each other, asked the same bizarre question. Did this house have a history of satanic worship or witchcraft? When I asked why, they all described seeing the same thing. A small figure, reddish, horns, darting between rooms or peeking around corners. A demon. I tried to laugh it off, but then I saw it too. Lights off, doors locked. I was alone, standing in the living room, when I saw it clearly in the reflection of the window. Something moved behind me, about 3 feet tall, vaguely humanoid, but definitely not human. It had pointed ears, or maybe small horns. Its skin in the reflection looked reddish. When I spun around, there was nothing there, but I wasn't going to forget what I'd just seen. The shape, the glint of eyes, the faint tap of hoof feet. That night, I finally broke down and started researching the home's history. Officially, The bank hadn't disclosed anything out of the ordinary, but something was wrong, and I needed to know what. What I found was a mess. Conflicting local legends, fragments of rumor passed off as fact. According to county records, the house had changed hands 8 times in 40 years. That's unusually high turnover. One elderly neighbor told me a little girl had been murdered there in the early 80s, kidnapped by an estranged uncle who supposedly killed her before the police could intervene. But I found no news articles to back it up. Then there was the mailman. He delivered to that address for over 20 years. Claimed a woman once jumped from the second-story window after finding her husband in bed with her sister. The problem? The windows in the house were standard size, too small for anyone to jump through without smashing the frame. There was no sign of that ever happening. A teenager across the street told me his dad believed the house had been built on a cursed spot in the woods, a place where, allegedly, locals once performed animal sacrifices before the subdivision went up, a place avoided by everyone. Teenagers used to dare each other to sleep there. No official records confirmed any of it. But one thing was certain. Almost every family that lived in the house moved out within 3 years. The last owners, the ones foreclosed on, had simply left, just walked away, most of their possessions still inside. Then, in June, I showed up for a 10 a.m. appointment. As I put the key in the front door, that scream rang out again. That same agonized, inhuman scream I'd heard months earlier with Jen. The couple behind me, middle-aged, hopeful, took one step back. "I think we'll pass," the husband said. He was already halfway to his car. I didn't blame him. Still, I was obligated to investigate. I entered alone, calling out, listening. Nothing. But the house felt charged, like it was holding its breath. Later that day, I was in the kitchen typing up notes when I heard footsteps again. Hoof-like. Tap, tap, tap. Down the hall toward me. I froze. The sound stopped right at the kitchen entrance. Then, pain. That same sharp pinch on my calf. I yelped, but this time I didn't run. I was angry now. "Stop it," I snapped aloud. "That hurts." And I swear to you, I heard it. A low, raspy chuckle. Close. Sometimes we'd arrive to find every window and door sealed shut. Locked. Keys wouldn't turn. Windows that usually slid open with ease felt fused. Each time we'd reschedule. And each time, everything worked fine when we returned. Too close. I left. Fast. After that, I stopped going alone. Every showing, I brought another agent. And every time, the little red man, the creature, never appeared when someone else was present. But strange things still happened. Once, during a showing, all 3 toilets in the house flushed simultaneously. We were all standing in the kitchen, far from any bathroom. The buyer laughed nervously, asking if the house had some kind of plumbing timer. It didn't. Electronic devices were even worse. Phones lost signal. Batteries drained rapidly. Digital cameras recorded blank or distorted images. One woman's Apple Watch started cycling through every screen like it was possessed before shutting down completely. Apple later found nothing wrong with it. By the 1-year mark, I was desperate. The bank was growing impatient, urging me to slash the already rock-bottom price. And I'd shown the house more than 50 times, with 0 offers. I debated telling the bank what was really going on. But what could I say? "Sorry, I can't sell your house. It's haunted by a demon." Didn't sound very professional. Then, finally, hope. In summer 2017, a young couple expressed interest. Both were scientists. He was a physicist, she a biologist. Rational, unshakable. They'd heard rumors, but saw it as an opportunity to score a great deal. No odd experiences during 3 separate visits. They were ready to make an offer. But on the day they came to sign paperwork, everything changed. We were sitting in the kitchen. It was August, 90 degrees outside. But suddenly, the temperature dropped, plummeted. Our breath became visible in the air. The wife clutched her husband's arm. "Do you smell that?" she whispered. I did. The strong, acrid stench of sulfur and blood. Then came the sound. A slow, scraping noise. from inside the walls. It moved along the perimeter of the room, slow, deliberate, louder, until it stopped directly behind me. I didn't dare turn around, but I didn't have to. Their eyes said everything, wide with fear, locked on something just beyond my shoulder. We all bolted. They never called again. After that, I seriously considered quitting real estate. My reputation was taking a hit. I was having nightmares, seeing a horned figure in my sleep, checking mirrors and corners in my own house. March 2018 was a breaking point. Exactly 2 years after I took the listing, I brought in a contractor for an estimate. The bank had agreed to some minor repairs to help move the sale. He was in the living room measuring a wall while I made a phone call in the kitchen. Then suddenly, he came running in, face pale, hands shaking. Without a word, he grabbed his toolbox and headed for the door. "What happened?" I shouted after him. "You didn't tell me what was in there," he snapped. You knew. I got 3 kids. I'm not messing around with this." I managed to calm him down just long enough to the lot on Kidd Street. Back in 2003, I was 15 years old, living in one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods where every house looked more or less the same, but people had wildly different ideas about lawn care. Some had immaculate, golf course-level lawns. Others clearly didn't care. Perfect for a kid with a push mower and some free time. I started mowing lawns when I was 13. It wasn't some professional business, just me, my dad's old mower, a rake, and some clippers. Still, I had about 8 regular clients and made good money for a teenager. My business cards were literally index cards with my name and number dropped into mailboxes. Then came the job on Kidd Street. One afternoon in late June, my mom handed me the cordless phone. "Remember those?" And said someone wanted lawn work done. The guy on the line said he needed help cleaning up his father's property. His dad was 86, too stubborn to move, and refused to hire help. The son lived out of state and couldn't deal with it himself. He'd spotted one of my cards during a recent visit. It all sounded normal, until he offered $200 for the job. That was serious cash for 15-year-old me. I could buy multiple PlayStation games with that. But when he described the property, I understood the price. It was a 1/4-acre lot on the edge of the subdivision, totally overgrown with 3-foot-tall grass and piles of junk. He mentioned a little cleanup too, which turned out to be a huge understatement. I biked over that same day to check it out. The yard was a disaster. Appliances, car parts, rain-soaked newspapers, and who knows what else littered the place. The grass was even taller than he'd said. The house itself was small and plain, but the lot looked like a scene from a hoarding show. I knocked on the door, but got no answer. The son had warned me his dad might not come to the door. Said he kept to himself. Fine by me. I wasn't looking for conversation. The next afternoon, I started work. I brought gloves, trash bags, and all my gear. My plan was to clear out the junk first, then tackle the grass. It was brutally hot, and I was soaked in sweat within 20 minutes. I barely cleared one corner. That's when I heard it. A quiet, childlike giggle behind me. I stood up and looked around. Nothing. Probably just the old man watching from inside. I figured. But then I noticed something about 15 feet away. The tall grass was moving, not from the wind. It looked like something crawling low to the ground, moving toward me. At first, I thought it might be a dog or maybe a big snake. But it was too large for a snake and too low for a dog. And that giggling, it was coming from the grass. I stood frozen. Hello? Is someone there? I called out, feeling ridiculous. The movement stopped. The laughing stopped too. Then something hit me in the back. I spun around, just in time to see a rusty suit can roll across the ground. Then another piece of junk, maybe a broken action figure, came flying from a totally different direction. That was enough for day one. I packed up and left, spooked. I considered backing out, but my dad always said, "You keep your word." And $200 was still $200. The next day, I brought my buddy Hecky along. He offered to help for free if I returned the favor by helping him move some furniture later. Having someone around made the work less creepy. We filled over 20 lawn bags with junk and stacked a bunch of scrap metal. The old man never appeared. While clearing a section near the back fence, I found something odd, a small wooden figurine buried in the dirt. It was about 5 inches tall, shaped like a person, but with a smooth, featureless face and a weirdly oversized head. I pocketed it, thinking it looked cool in a creepy sort of way. A few minutes later, I turned to show it to Hecky and nearly jumped out of my skin. He was about 10 feet away, but the look on his face froze me. He was staring past me, mouth slightly open. I spun around and saw nothing, but he swore he'd seen someone or something standing just beyond the tall grass. A small figure with red skin, hooked feet, and tiny horns. A little devil, he said. That's exactly how he described it. It had smiled at him and said in a childlike voice, "This is my house." Hecky refused to come back after that. I finished the job myself. Barely. I got paid, but I called the owner's son that afternoon and told him I wouldn't be coming back. I even recommended they try auctioning the place off or just demolishing it. He didn't argue at all, which told me they probably knew more than they let on. As far as I know, the house is still empty. I drive a different route to work just to avoid seeing it. Sometimes I check the county records. Last I checked, it still hasn't sold. A few of my colleagues in real estate have picked up the listing since. None have sold it. One even quit the industry altogether. I don't know what lives in that house. I don't know if it's tied to some local legend or something much older. But I do know this. Some houses aren't meant for the living. And whatever that redskin horn thing was, it made its claim clear. This is my house. I was sitting in the living room, going through my Spanish flashcards, when I started hearing footsteps behind me. Heavy footsteps, like a man wearing boots, walking across the hardwood floor. My heart skipped a beat, and I spun around, expecting to see Emma's father coming home early. But there was nobody in the room with me. I froze. The footsteps continued, but they weren't in front of me. They were behind me, coming from the direction of the kitchen. I stood up, my skin prickling, and slowly walked toward the sound, every step of mine echoing loudly in my ears. I rounded the corner into the kitchen, but there was no one there. The kitchen was empty, the lights dim, casting long shadows across the counters. The footsteps stopped. I felt like I was being watched, but there was no one to be seen. I checked the back door, making sure it was locked. Nothing. No sign of anyone entering or leaving. I was starting to panic, but I reminded myself that I was overreacting. It was probably just the house settling or some weird noise from outside. I turned to head back to the living room. But as soon as I stepped back in, the footsteps started again, this time behind me, louder and closer. I spun around so fast, my heart pounding in my chest. And there, standing in the doorway between the kitchen and the hallway, was a figure, a tall, dark shape, just standing there. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its eyes on me. I was rooted to the spot, too terrified to move. The air in the room seemed to get colder, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the figure was gone, vanished into thin air. I stood there, frozen, trying to catch my breath. I don't know how long I stood there, but when I finally moved again, it was to run upstairs to Emma's room. I needed to check on her to make sure she was safe. But when I opened her door, I stopped dead in my tracks. She was still asleep, clutching her stuffed giraffe in the same position as always. But this time, there was something different. Her room was freezing cold, far colder than it had been before. A chill ran through me as I stepped inside. The monitor was on, the static buzzing in the background. It was so loud, it almost felt like it was coming from inside my head. I rushed back downstairs, trying to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right, but I couldn't shake it. The house felt off, like I wasn't alone. I didn't tell her parents when they came home that night. It seemed too insane, too unexplainable. And besides, I wasn't sure I believed it myself. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next time I came over to babysit, I made sure to keep the monitor on the entire time, keeping an eye on it constantly. But nothing happened. No whispers, no footsteps, no figure standing in doorways. For a while, I thought it had all been my imagination. But then, about a month later, I heard the laughing again. This time, it was coming from Emma's room. It wasn't her laugh. It was deeper, like an adult's, and it chilled me to my core. I went upstairs to check, and Emma was awake this time, sitting up in her crib. She was staring at something in the corner of the room. When she saw me, she smiled and said, "The man with the boots is here." I couldn't leave fast enough that night. After that, I never babysat for Emma again, and I never told her parents about what had been happening either. I didn't want to sound crazy, but I knew something had been in that house, something that wasn't supposed to be there. I spun around, heart pounding, but the trail was empty. My flashlight flickered as I scanned the trees, but I couldn't see anything out of the ordinary. Still, that feeling of being watched wouldn't leave me. I kept walking, faster now, determined to get back to my car. Every rustle of leaves seemed louder than it should have been, and every shadow seemed to stretch farther than it should have in the dimming light. It felt like something was just beyond the edge of my vision, moving in the woods. As I neared the clearing where I parked my car, I caught that same dark movement again, just on the edge of the tree line. It was brief, but unmistakable. Something, or someone, was following me. I turned and called out, my voice shaking. "Who's there?" The only answer was a wind whistling through the branches. My pulse raced as I forced myself to continue walking, my footsteps growing louder, more hurried with each passing second. When I reached the car, I didn't stop to check the surrounding woods. I practically threw myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. My hands were slick with sweat as I started the engine and tore out of there, not looking back once. The whole drive home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone or something following me, but there was nothing. I didn't stop for gas. I didn't stop for food. I just drove straight home. Later that night, I sat in my apartment, the camera propped up in front of me on the table. I was trying to salvage the footage, but my mind kept replaying what had happened. The whispering in the cave, the strange layered voice, the feeling of being watched. I tried to shake it off, but it was hard to ignore. I watched the footage of the cave over and over again, looking for any signs of what I had heard. At first, it seemed normal, just some shaky footage of the dark cave entrance, the occasional flicker of my flashlight. But then I noticed something strange. At the very edge of the frame, just before I turned back out of the cave, there's a shadow moving, something dark, a shape that doesn't belong. I froze, my heart pounding. I couldn't believe it. I rewound the footage again, and there it was, a dark figure, standing just inside the cave. It wasn't human, at least not in the way I understood humans to be. It was too tall, too elongated, its features blending into the shadows. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. The whisper I had heard wasn't just the wind. That voice, those voices had been real, and whatever was in that cave, whatever had been watching me on that hike, wasn't something I had ever wanted to encounter again. I didn't return to the Black Mountains after that. My channel never took off as I had hoped, and I stopped posting videos of abandoned places for a while. But the footage from that trip still haunts me. Every time I look at it, I feel the same chill, the same pressure in my chest, like something's watching, just waiting for me to come back. Maybe one day I'll go back. Maybe I'll be brave enough. But until then, I keep my distance, and I think twice about where I point my camera. The wrong address continued. Didn't argue. He just stared at me for a long time, as if trying to make sense of what I was telling him. I wasn't sure how to explain it, how to make him believe that something was happening with those calls. That night, as I sat in the diner, tried to eat something to calm my nerves, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my old partner. He sent me a link to a news story, a piece about a family that had recently moved into an old farmhouse out in the country. The house had been abandoned for years, but this new family had decided to fix it up. The article didn't mention anything about paranormal activity, but the picture that accompanied it was unmistakable. It was a house from my last call, the very same one I had gone into, the one with the cries from upstairs. The strangest thing was the name of the family that had moved in, It was a coincidence. I thought at first, just another ordinary family with an ordinary name. But as I read further, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Their last name was the same as the person who had called for help that night, James. The text from my partner made me uneasy, but what happened next was even worse. The next morning, I was called into the office. My supervisor looked even more tired than usual. He handed me a report, something that had been filed after I had taken the week off for counseling. It was a routine investigation into some missing persons cases from around the area. One name stood out, a woman named Sarah James, who had gone missing 10 years ago in the same area where I had responded to those calls. The report mentioned something strange. She had been pregnant at the time. I felt like the walls were closing in. Every piece of the puzzle was falling into place. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to know what the bigger picture was. The last straw came when I received one more call, just a week after I had returned to work. It was for a woman in labor. Again, the address, the same farmhouse, the same house. It had been empty, abandoned for years, but somehow the call came through like it was real. Dispatch verified the location. This time, I didn't even hesitate. I called in sick and left town. I couldn't face it anymore. To this day, I still don't understand what happened or why those calls kept coming. Was it a twisted coincidence? Or was there something more to it? All I know is that I quit my job with EMS. I left the county and never looked back. I found a new job in a city far from there, but sometimes, when I'm alone late at night, I still hear those cries. I still feel the presence of something just beyond the edge of my vision, calling me, drawing me back. And the worst part? I know that if I ever go back to that place, the house will still be there, waiting for me. I request you to please like my video and subscribe my channel, and give your remarks in comment section. It will motivate me to give you best true stories.